Grosvenor Place, the 1991 Sulman Award, is the 5th Sulman Award to be given to Harry Seidler and Associates since the Rose Seidler House 40 years ago in 1951. The other 4 awards have all been for office buildings. 3 of them being towers in Sydney's central business district. Each building has captured the technical possibilities and market desires of its time, punctuating decades, and witnessing a way of thinking that is as remarkable for its consistency as for its diversity. A consistent design approach has kept these projects aloof from the transience of fashion, giving to Sydney instead a timeless aesthetic born of a deep concern with fundamentals. In many ways, Grosvenor Place is the result of evolutionary ideas, stronger through conviction won from earlier explorations. However, despite the obvious wisdom in the architect's design approach, Mr. Seidler readily credits his client with the success of the project.
In my experience, for a really wholehearted building ever to come into being, it's usually due to one man who has the will and the power to say, I know what I want to have built, and I know who I want to do this for me. The person who was responsible for the main decision-making was Bob Hammond. It's his foresight and his program decision-making that created the building. He was a client that wanted a building to serve an income, permanent income on its investment for an indefinite period. He wanted that building to last and remain valid physically, and I added aesthetically, well into the next century.
This clear mandate to create long-term value anchors the conviction behind many design decisions. The building was designed to suit a current and predicted future demand for large, uninterrupted spaces to accommodate whole organizations on one level. Typical floors feature up to 2,000 square meters of net flexible floor space, unencumbered by internal columns. The client's desire for an asset of long-term value justified an investment in energy conservation systems and low-maintenance construction. Perhaps the most remarkable energy-saving idea is the sunshades, which protect each window from the bulk of ultraviolet penetration. Although each sunshade is identical, each one rotates slightly to greet the sun at an optimal angle to suit its orientation throughout the day. To the east and west, the blades are vertical to block the light down to a low angle, while to the north, the blades are horizontal to accommodate the sun high in the sky. The blades rotate through a quadrant as they sweep around the quadrant of the tower. A small gap between the blades and the facade reflects just enough light to be useful for work tasks immediately inside. The geometry of the plan form of the tower offers opportunities for every structural beam and span to be identical. It follows that every column, its space, and the floor load it carries are the same, just as is every facade element.
The building had to be built fast, and that's one of the reasons why the core is in concrete and the beams are steel. And the fact that all the steel beams are the same produced a steel price that was far lower than any other laboriously fabricated steel thing that you normally see in square buildings and others. And all the facade elements are prefabricated, they're made on the ground and lifted up, including the polished stone on the outside. The building from the first floor on was one contract, where it's fully repetitive, it's all the same. So the facade element that is placed against the steel, the bare steel, had to be such that it automatically formed the formwork for the concrete fireproofing. But it also already had on it the granite facing.
The site offers excellent views toward the harbour, the Opera House and Harbour Bridge, and southwest toward Darling Harbour.
We shaped it in such a way that we maximized the orientation toward where we knew there was a permanent gap, which was looking down George Street. Nobody's going to build a building in George Street in predictable times. So it is curved from north to east to look down the harbor. That's one of the fine axes. We knew on the west it's very likely that somebody will build something, and true enough, that's happened since. And the view to the southwest is maximized also. From early days on, I drew these two quadrants, these sweeps. Why a quadrant? I think it relates easily to the rectangle. You know, it's a quarter of a circle from which you make right angles. Curved building, why is it offset and not parallel? Well, I prefer the tension between these two things being offset. They sort of fight each other in a way. They're not phlegmatic. They have some energy generated between them. And also, of course, the site, which is elongated. Those two almost needed to be that way.
Since the brief required very large floor areas, careful consideration had to be given to the resultant bulk and orientation.
But what we felt was undesirable to make it a bulky-looking building where most people see it from, which is from the city. I mean, the east, southeast, where the bulk of the, CBD is, it looks slim from there. You look at almost like the prow of a ship from that side. Where it is broad is from the harbor. But because of its curve, it also diminishes. I mean, a circular, any curved building will in elevation always look smaller than an equal area squarish one.
The quadrants offer a full sweep of the best views, as well as rectilinear ends that anchor the building into the orthogonal pattern of the adjacent features of the city. One immediately adjacent feature of the city was, of course, the Johnsons' building, which Mr. Seidler brought into public debate as he campaigned, against the opinion of the day, for its demolition in order to relieve pedestrian congestion and to give the project a more dignified address.
There were three buildings on the south side which were to be retained for historic and environmental and, streetscape reasons. And the center one, the Royal Naval House, I think is a fine piece of design. It's an elegant building. It has nice proportions, it has nice detail, projections, it has a lot of interest in it. And what I think is particularly nice in that building is its eastern sort of gable end facade. Its benefit would have been it being actually the first parade ground of the colony, this very site. I'm sorry only that, first of all, that it didn't happen. It would have been far better, of course, to enter the building. Right now, the relationship, which is quite a collision, really, between this huge building and this bad corner brick building. I mean, the pedestrian congestion on that corner is quite awful. The only thing that we had to retain was the first 3 meters back. They were only interested in the facade and the first slope of the roof. Behind that, anything could happen. And that also, to me, is a sort of two-dimensional notion about architecture, which I find quite despicable. Architecture is a three-dimensional art. If something is really worth keeping, it should be kept in totality and made something of. Well, it's my belief, after trying several times to build a large building and put it into the urban fabric, that the inevitable result is that you inject thousands more people onto that piece of land than were there before. 7,000, something like that, move into a building like that, in and out of it every day. And to, as our authorities will have us usually do nowadays, to build right out to the footpath, I think is an absurdity. And to inject that many more people onto these footpaths, force them onto this narrow walkway, is quite inhuman. What they crave most is somewhere to feel that there's a chance of repose, of relaxation, of being removed from the hustle and bustle of the city. Well, it's always been my belief, which is ages old, that an important object, whether it's a public building or certainly a large structure of this kind, should be and should demand the creation and the permanent display of works of art. Stella is a man that I've always had a particular rapport with ever since we've done the embassy in Paris, because I've been intrigued with the geometry of the quadrant. And in those days, there were a whole series of paintings of his that related quadrants to the rectangle. And what he first sent us, and what I had seen studies of in his studio, were white and black three-dimensional objects, which seemed to break out in a almost riotous way. The painting had come off the wall. It had almost become a clinging sculpture. He sent the first three models in black and white, and I thought they were wonderful. And I said, "Are they're going to be black and white, are they?" And he said, "Oh, there might be a little color."